Hello everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video. Today we're back with another market analysis. I know I've been making a lot more of these recently, but you guys seem to enjoy them, and there's just been a ton of changes, game updates that have then majorly reflected on the economy. Obviously the new one is the Nightmare, and today I wanted to have a look at all of the new items, have a look at how much they were selling for on day 1, day 2, day 3, stuff like that, where I think their prices are headed, and any other items that have been affected by the update. The short answer is almost every PVM item has been affected, so there is just a lot to talk about. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and let's get started. Now, naturally, first up here, I kind of want to look at the new rewards from the Nightmare. Now, the new rewards are not common, however, the boss is fairly easy to kill, so we're still seeing quite a few of them enter the game. For example, if we look at the Nightmare staff on the RuneScape marketplace, we can see that on the first day there were 80 traded, second day 100 traded. Now, we don't actually know how many staffs, for example, are actually in the game, because I'm sure a lot of people were either flipping the staff or just buying it temporarily to test it and then selling it back. So it's possible there's only like 10 Nightmare staffs in the game, but there's 83 transactions on that day. So we don't really know for sure, but that still seems a bit more than what I had thought just based on Reddit. However, if we go ahead and look at the attachment items, they seem to be either more rare or just less people have gotten them so far. Day 1 only has 18 trades, which could mean just literally one orb is in the game, or maybe just a couple. That's for the Eldritch Orb. The Harmonized Orb is a bit more at 32. The Volatile Orb is very minimal at 10. So again, there could just be a few in the entire game trading back and forth. And then we have the Melee Armor set. The Inquisitor's Plate Skirt has about 28 traded. The Mace has about 14 traded the first day and 19 the second day. The Hauberk has about 10 traded the first day. And the Great Helm has 20 traded the first day. Nobody is ballsy enough to make a Inquisitor's armor set yet, not surprising. So based on that loose information, we can deduce that either the Nightmare Staff dropped more frequently the first day, or it has a more common drop rate, or 3, it is just a more desirable item that a lot of people traded back and forth. Now, as far as the prices, we are on GE Tracker, but not all of the sales are going to be logged here. However, I did scour around on Reddit and YouTube and found some of the day 1 sales. I believe the Nightmare Staff sold for max cash on the GE. Maybe a few of them traded outside of the GE for more, but as far as I'm aware, the highest I found was max cash on day 1. However, the staff has already dropped by a pretty significant amount, down to somewhere between 700 and 800 mil. Now, on day 1, I found a transaction for the mace at around 1.3 bill. However, it still seems to be very high. Even today on GE Tracker, it's showing transactions around the 1.5 bill mark, and within 24 hours, one that went for nearly 2 bill. So the item is either more desirable, or there has just been less of those drops in the game so far. Now, as far as the individual Inquisitor armor pieces, they went for a bill plus on day 1. However, they dropped rather quickly. The Great Helm is currently going for around 300 mil. The plate body has no transactions here, but I would imagine it's maybe around 400 to 500 mil. And I'm sure the plate skirt is probably around the 300 to 400 mil mark. This item piece is probably going to drop the quickest in my opinion, as it's only really viable for a niche set of accounts. When you compare that to the mace, for example, which is going to be the best in slot crush weapon, that is going to be very expensive. And we have the new magic weapon, which is really powerful in PvP and could have uses outside of that as well. So to summarize, pretty much all of the items on day 1 went for a bill or more, besides the Jar of Dreams, which actually sold for 70 mil at first. However, currently it's worth around 1.3 mil. Now, it's really interesting about this drop table, and this is not confirmed at all, so this is just a suspicion. That is that the drop rates are not scaling with group size. For example, if someone takes on a Nightmare with 80 people, the chance of getting a unique drop is not 80 times higher. Again, not confirmed, but that would be kind of contributing to the very low amount of items coming into the game. Just to clarify, in general, I'm pretty happy with what kind of drop table we're looking at. I think these items will remain at a fairly high price just based on their rarity and the lack of meaningful drops otherwise. Like, there's not many resource drops or anything like that to get you your money back unless you hit big. With that said though, I think it's a bit unfair if the Nightmare boss scales with the amount of people as far as difficulty wise, HP wise. However, the drop rate doesn't scale as well. That would be kind of weird. What would be the point of making a scaling boss if it doesn't actually give more loot? Kind of weird to me. Again, not confirmed, just a lot of people are suspecting that. Now, initially when the Inquisitor's Mace was announced, a lot of people thought it would crash in price very quickly. The main reason being that it is a crush weapon, and in the game there aren't actually a lot of things that are weak to crush. Of course, there are certain things, however, most of the high-end PVM bosses are weak to ranged, magic, or slash, or something like that. However, that kind of changed with the Nightmare because the Nightmare itself is weak to crush, so it's kind of useful within itself. So now it's kind of hard to predict exactly what the item price will crash to. The Rapier, which is a very similar weapon, stabilized at around 200 mil. So I think we could expect the Inquisitor's Mace to hit that point eventually. Even though it is useful at the Nightmare, that still kind of maybe at best puts it on par with the Rapier. So maybe 200 mil for that one. Now for the Nightmare Staff, I'm not sure yet. In my opinion, it's going to come down to how useful it is in PVM. So far, I've seen most people test it in PvP, and it's definitely a really strong weapon, but I think it will retain a higher value if it is used elsewhere, because honestly, just a lot more people do PVM. So my guess would probably be 100 mil or less for the Nightmare Staff, obviously depending on some other factors. Okay, so beyond the actual new items, pretty much every PVM item was affected by the release of the Nightmare, and it kind of is pretty easy to look at what items are useful there and what items aren't. First up here, let's have a look at the Bludgeon. Look how many more are traded as soon as the Nightmare is released. Instantly spikes from around 25 mil up to 40 mil, and it's still hovering around 37 mil right now, so the Bludgeon obviously very useful. Now if we look at the Elder Maul, it kind of is a similar story, except the Elder Maul turned out not to be the best item to use there, or at least so far. It went from around 16 mil up to 24 mil for a very minimal amount of time, and then has now crashed back down further, even lower than when it was before the update. We have the Sarachna's Cudgel, which actually spiked up about 4 times in value, still worth about double what it was before, so a lot of people are using the Cudgel. Now as this is a melee boss, pretty much any best in slot melee gear is going up very quickly as well. We have the Jaw, which went from around 32 mil, is now up to 40 mil, rising up very quickly. And other items like the Bandos Chestplate pretty much immediately rose up by about 10 or 20%. And surprisingly, there's actually one magic weapon that has seen a pretty solid increase, and that is the Sanguinesti Staff, going from around 105 mil and currently sitting at around 120. As you do actually need magic to take out the pillars, the Sanguinesti Staff turned out to be a very good option because it also helps you keep your HP higher, which lets you do longer trips. Now beyond those type of items, pretty much every other PVM item has crashed because it was not used at the Nightmare and people were selling all their gear off quickly so that they could afford the gear that was useful. So for example, we have the Armadillo Chestplate instantly dropping about 2 or 3 mil. The Chain Skirt, the same story, dropping about 3 or 4 mil. The Mage's Book dropping about 2 mil or about a quarter of its value. The Dragonfire Ward dropping about 3 mil. A really big one, and one that kind of benefited me, is the Twisted Bow, dropping about 100 mil in one day. And we do have the Rapier, which is a melee weapon, however it is not using the proper attack style, so it's not actually really useful at the Nightmare. In my opinion, one of the most interesting items over the last couple of months has been the Scythe of Viter. Now what I find really interesting about this is the Scythe of Viter is really useful at the Nightmare. It's best in slot as far as I'm aware. However, unlike all of the other items that are useful at the Nightmare, the Scythe actually crashed by a significant amount. Now in my opinion, this has to do with the fact that the Scythe was just really inflated because most people thought the Scythe would be best in slot here. And that was later confirmed pretty much when they mentioned that the boss would be 4x4 or the Scythe would be very effective against the boss by default. So because of that, the Scythe raised up in value a lot, and even though the suspicions turned out to pretty much be true, the item just had so many people investing in it, it was overvalued, and it still crashed by about 100 mil. I find that extremely fascinating myself. Now another explanation I could think of is that the Scythe costs money to use, so even though it is best in slot at the Nightmare, the drops are pretty rare and you are expending a lot more money per hour going for the drops if you're using this Scythe. So the Bludgeon is probably the best well-rounded item that doesn't cost money per hour, beyond the new Inquisitor's Mace of course, but that is going to be pretty rare. Now I'm sure a lot of people are going to ask me in this video, should I invest in these items because there's a big dip going on right now? Potentially, but I would be very careful. Now again, I don't really like to give investing advice too much. This is just my own opinion. I might not be right about this, but what you really want to do is go back further than this. Yes, if you just look at this graph here, it looks like, well, the Armadillo Chestplate is on a 4 mil discount right now. But if you look back the last 3 months, this item has been raising up in anticipation of the Nightmare, so it could already be a bit overvalued. 37 mil is still relatively cheap, but I wouldn't expect it to go back up to 40. Same thing for the chain skirt, kind of was raising up the last couple of months, crashed back down, so it might not be a terrible investment, but it wouldn't be a surefire win. Scythe is a really good example of that. Right now it's worth 700 mil. 3 months ago it was worth 600, so I wouldn't necessarily invest in it just based on this price dip. Twisted Bow right now, 50 mil discount from a week ago, but it has been raising up pretty much since November. Anyway guys, that is going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, I would appreciate it if you took the time to leave the video a like. Once again, I'll be having a live stream tomorrow, Sunday, probably around 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for those who use that time zone. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed, and I will be seeing you tomorrow.